In this short video, I'm going to give you some tips for writing your personal statement for your application to graduate school. I'm Dr. Sherry Wischusen, and I have been Director of Undergraduate Research in the College of Science at LSU for 20 years. I've worked with lots of students, and I hope this little bit of information can help you in your successful application to graduate school. The big ideas that you should keep in mind when you begin this process of writing your personal statement is, where are you applying? What are their specific instructions? What kind of application, what kind of document are they asking for? What do you want them to know about you? And how are you going to tell this story to the reviewers? And whose feedback are you going to request as you finalize your document? It's really important as you start writing that you pay attention to exactly what the university is asking for. Different graduate schools ask for different information. Some will give you a list of 3 or 4 big questions for you to provide personalized answers to. Some will ask for a comprehensive personal statement with very few hints as to what they're looking for, while some will ask for 2 different statements. First, a very personal statement, and then also a secondary academic statement. We're going to focus on the personal statement that is either a comprehensive personal statement or a part of the personal and academic statements package. And the first thing that you need to pay attention to is how much instruction they give you about how this should be presented. If they tell you a page length, if they tell you a font size and style, or if they tell you what sort of margins that you should have, make sure that you follow those instructions. They're not just busy work for you. They're not just trying to trip you up so that they have an easy way to cull applicants. They're doing it to make it easier on the faculty and staff who have to review these documents. And so they want some sort of a consistent style so people will be able to just immediately start reading and not have to kind of flounder around finding the information that they need. So, if they tell you no more than 2 pages, do not send them a 6-page document. If they specify New York Times 12 point, make sure that you give them that. And be reasonable with your margins, whether or not they tell you exactly what to do with those. The personal statement's a very unique part of an application, whether it's for graduate school or something else. You've completed their fill-in-the-blank demographics portion of the application. You've had them sent a CV, a transcript. They have all of the hard and fast data about you. This is a chance to show them what kind of a person you are, what sort of personal experiences that you have had and that you want to have at their university. You need to tell them who you are and why you want to be at that university in that specific program. Okay, so now you've got to figure out what you're going to put on this paper. What do you want them to know about you? A couple of really important things to remember on either side of this grand thing you're going to produce is, you're not writing your autobiography. You don't want 6 or 8 pages, because even if they haven't specified that they want it short, you don't want them to have to read 6 or 8 pages about you at this point. Leave them wanting more. Tell 1 or 2 interesting stories out of your life story that are good examples of how you got to where you are today and why you want to be at their university and why you want to study whatever it is that you want to study at their university. And on the other side of that, don't restate all of the information that you've already provided for them in your CV, your transcripts, your application form, any other of those data-driven documents that you have shared with them or are readily available to them as part of your application packet. Let's get a little more specific. What are you going to tell them? What is special about you? Do you have anything unique in your life story that would be of interest to a graduate committee, a major professor? And what special skills do you have? Have you been a good leader at points in your past? Have you had a job that required you to manage a large group of people? And how did you develop these skills? Were you a Boy Scout leader? Were you a manager at a pet food store? Give specific examples of these special skills that you have. And what are your career goals? This folds back into why you want to come to their university and be a part of their program. What exactly do you want to do with your life? And why will you fit in a good program there? And give examples. This is an especially good one. If there are some gaps or some issues in your academic record that somebody might look at and question, here's your chance to talk about those. Suppose you had a really bad semester. Things didn't go well. Your GPA dropped. What happened that semester? If it's something that is, a tangible example, your little brother was sick. You got sick yourself. Something terrible happened within your family. You don't have to give graphic details. Folks don't want to hear all of the gory details. But they need to know that that was not the usual. That was something that happened. Things happen. Things happen to all of us. But flip that to be able to say to the graduate committee in this document that you learned from this by doing whatever it was that you did to overcome it, and that you're now back, you're bigger and better than ever, here's why. Explain what went on. And also tell them the most compelling reasons why they should choose you. Remember that you're not the only person who's applying for graduate school here now, and you should be the one selected. We're going to start working on how to tell your story. You have all of these ideas whirling around in your head that we've talked about. You kind of know what you want to say, but now you've got to start saying it. The hardest part is getting started. Try basically whatever works for you, but getting something on paper or on the screen is just a matter of starting to put words down. Maybe making an outline. That works really well for a lot of people. It can help you get the big picture organized, and then you can go back in and fill in details in your outline. Sometimes if I'm really stuck, I just do a mind dump. I start writing things down. Just random thoughts that come to my head, just line after line of, well, I want to talk about this, and then I want to talk about that, and here's a random thought I might want to add later. And you can always keep that mind dump going at the bottom of the page. And then as you get more organized, fill in at the top with your actual document. A mind dump can be very helpful. And along the same line is catching random thoughts. If you're in the middle of a paragraph about your high school experience in science and you come across some thought about a history project you once did that you want to talk about later, add that to your mind dump at the bottom of the page or the screen and just keep those random thoughts handy. It doesn't do well for me to just think, okay, well, I'm going to remember that for later, but I've got to keep this thought going. Just take a second and write a word or a phrase at the bottom. That will help you to remember that when you get ready to put that piece of information into your document. Once you have things down, once you've started to put some bits together, only then do you need to start organizing. Once you get going, concentrate on your lead paragraph. You need to get their attention. You're one of dozens of potential graduate students that these faculty and staff are reading documents from. Be memorable. Make sure that they come back and go, now there was this one person who talked about X and I want to know more about them. Make sure that's you. As you're writing, there are a couple of things to make sure that you keep in mind. It's very important to stay away from potentially controversial subjects. You don't know who the person is who's reading and evaluating your application. Things like religion and politics, for the most part, are unacceptable. But especially for a graduate program, unless it's in political science or religious studies, and in those cases, it's probably not terribly appropriate to give your own opinions on things at this point either. So just be careful when you think that something that you might say could come across to somebody else differently than you would want it to. And avoid cliches. Don't use the example of finding a baby bird that had fallen out of its nest when you were 4 and visiting your grandmother. You nursed it back to health and you knew from that day on you wanted to be a doctor. Don't use that one. Everybody uses that one. If I had a nickel for every time I read that story in an application, I wouldn't have to be here making this video for you because I would be a megalomillionaire. So don't do that. And also do make sure that you do enough research on the institution, on the research that goes on there, on a couple of the professors that you may be interested in working with, so that you can talk a little bit about the campus, the area. Maybe there's an interesting thing about that part of the country. Just let them know that you had enough interest in their part of the world and their campus that you did some research on them. You've gotten to the place now you have all your narrative, you know exactly what you want to say to them, and you have it mostly down on paper or on the screen. And now it's time to take yourself out of the author seat and put yourself into the reader's seat. This is going to be somebody in the graduate school office. It's going to be some professor that you think you want to work with, that you would just like to get your foot in the door with. And so think as that person How will my life be easier if this author has done just a few things? So you are going to now make that application look pleasant, look comfortable and readable. It may sound silly and it may sound frivolous, but trust me, as somebody who reads stacks of documents on a fairly regular basis, if I find some of these things that I'm about to tell you not to do, it makes me less happy than I might be otherwise. And you want the reviewer, the reader, to be happy when they're reading your document. Doesn't that sort of make sense? So you're going to add white space to your page. You're going to use a comfortable font or the font that they have requested or required, as we talked about before. And you're going to break up the text with headers. White space is a very underrated writing tool. Look at these two documents that I've cut and pasted into this slide. The top one in the "do not do this" red circle. Would you want to read that? Do you want to try to read that? But look at the one at the bottom. It probably has almost the same number of words and yet is much easier on the eye. It's much easier on your mind. You're going to be able to stick with that. If you have to look away for a moment, you're going to be able to find your place back on the page, as opposed to the top one, which is just, at this point, it looks like one big run-on sentence. And as for fonts, you want to make it readable. If you have a lot to say and you feel that you need to use 9 or 10 point font, stop yourself. You really don't want to subject anybody to having to figure that out. 11 or 12 point font is typically the norm. This is in bold and should not be used for regular text. That's hard to read. Save bold and underlined and italic for making something stand out, but not all of the text. Use something that's going to be easy for the reviewer to read through your entire document. Using headers is an extension of adding that white space that we talked about before. It's a way to organize your document so that it makes it easy for the reader to go back and look for details that they may want to re-familiarize themselves with. And it does give you a little more of that great white space. So make sure that your headers make sense. Only put headers on important parts of your document, not every paragraph. And make sure that you use just a little bit different font or perhaps bolding to make them stand out. You've gotten your document written. You know exactly what it says. You have read it so many times that you no longer read it. You now just recite it along. You've gotten to a point that you can't edit anymore. So now it's time to really put yourself out there and ask friends and colleagues and family and classmates and professors to read it for you. This is a really important step. You know what you wanted to say, but sometimes all of us don't really say what we think we said, or it doesn't read like we meant it to read, or we fill in the gaps in a sentence with the words that we know should be there and we think are there but really aren't. Having fresh eyes on a document is invaluable. You need to have people read it who are familiar with the content, who know you, who know the research that you've been working on as an undergraduate, who know what you've done, so that they can read it for content. They can help you fix mistakes in the science jargon that you've used, the dates of the scientific meetings that you attended, those sorts of things. And also, you want somebody who doesn't necessarily know anything about the science or even, anything about any of it that you're talking about, but can just read it for flow. It makes a good story. It's compelling. Maybe if you rearrange these couple of paragraphs, it would make more sense and it would flow better. And then, whatever you do, make sure that somebody who knows how to edit grammar takes a good hard look at it. There is almost nothing worse than sending off an application for graduate school with grammatical errors. That says a lot of really bad things about the writer to the reader. It says you don't understand basic grammar, whether or not you do. It says that you're not good with detail because you didn't find these little errors. Those are not things that will endear you to anybody within a graduate school. So make sure that somebody looks at it for grammar for you. And just make sure in all of this editing that you do get as many people as you can find to read it for you. It will be better for that. I hope that these few tips that I've provided will help you at least get started writing your graduate school application. If you're at this point in your undergrad career, then it's pretty exciting, and I hope you're successful. There are several resources that could be really helpful to you. GoGrad.org and gradschools.com have lots of templates and examples and prompts that can really help you along your way in this writing process. And lots of colleges and universities have writing prompts and helps that are available to everybody. And I just noted Yale and Rollins as two really good sources. But good luck and knock them dead in graduate school.